Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. If you can't hear us, can you just drop a note in the chat or just let us know, just in case anyone's got any problems. I'm Amelia Matthews, and I'm delighted to host this short but very important session with Ben Francis, our Managing Director here at DHH Panel Products. This webinar is building upon our October and November campaigns across our social media, where we've been encouraging the industry to start, reflect and act against the trade of suspicious origin birch plywood.
Thanks, Amelia. Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us today. I'm just going to click into an opening slide just to give you an overview of what we're going to run through today. Yeah, I mean, we'll start by just setting the scene in terms of trading, what we're currently seeing in the UK and the EU markets, why birch supply chains are under pressure and how suspicious material is finding its way into the EU, UK and EU markets. Next, I'll explain exactly what we mean by suspicious birch and look at some key characteristics. With reference to your own due diligence, we'll identify some red flags that may indicate something may not be compliant or legitimate, whether that be packaging and paperwork inconsistencies to unusual sales patterns that can help you identify potential issues before material enters your supply chain. We'll cover the correct steps on who to notify if you feel something isn't right and how to protect the organisation while ensuring the issue is escalated appropriately. We'll talk about the role each of us plays, suppliers, distributors, stakeholders and industry bodies, and how collaboration can make the biggest impact. At the end, we will open up the floor just for a few questions, time permitting. So yeah, just as an introduction and an overview of the UK, we're continuing to see suspicious birch plywood entering both the UK and EU markets. This isn't an isolated issue, it's happening consistently and through multiple channels. Trade flows are quickly changing and adapting to authorities' investigations and interventions. As an example, the EU has recently seen a significant spike in volume supplies of birch plywood from Lebanon to Greece, up to around 3,500 cubic metres in only a matter of months, which looks like a direct manoeuvre after an EU clampdown on Egypt, who had previously supplied this region. Price pressure is certainly driving a demand for low-cost products, and in many cases these products are not properly verified. When the market chases the cheapest options, it creates opportunities for material with unclear or falsified origins to slip through. Responsible, compliant suppliers are certainly being negatively impacted in the UK and finding it difficult to fairly compete with the products they're legitimately sourcing from EU bona fide producers. UKTR is being blatantly ignored in many scenarios and undermined by fraudulent supply chains with often incomplete documentation and weak declarations, something that we'll touch upon later. Although sanctions and regulations exist in the UK, enforcement action has been slow, which has certainly created gaps for suspicious material to move through easily. Recent EU anti-dumping duties on hardwood plywood may result in additional volumes of questionable origin birch plywood being offered to the UK market, so it's vital that we all remain vigilant. These products may also be offered via Vietnam or Indonesia, as these countries are not yet subject to duties. So overall, the combination of market pressure, weak documentation and inconsistent enforcement is creating an environment where suspicious birch plywood can still circulate, and that's why understanding the risk is so important. If we just cover what we describe as suspicious birch to give you an insight, and for those unfamiliar with the issue or the term, when we talk about suspicious birch, we're referring to birch plywood that has been moved or presented in a way purposely designed to disguise its true origin, in this case Russian. The motive behind this is generally to evade existing trade sanctions. The first pattern we've seen in certainly the EU and now the UK over the last couple of years is repackaged and relabeled Russian manufactured birch plywood or components. And in many cases, the material is containerised or loaded in Russia, then shipped to intermediary or transit countries to disguise its journey. Once there, it's simply relabeled and sold under a falsified origin document. Investigations over the last 18 months by groups like Woodstock and Earthsight have exposed several of these practices in the EU market, where prosecutions and fines are now pending. The second major pattern involves the supply of Russian birch logs to other countries rather than finished plywood. Now, logs are exported to processing countries such as China and parts of Southeast Asia, as they have open trade agreements and no sanctions. It's here that those logs are peeled and manufactured into plywood, which isn't illegal in itself. However, it's often then falsely declared as Latvian or Baltic origin wood and supplied into the EU and UK markets, which is then a clear breach of sanctions and is illegal. These products often come with dubious or weak documentation, such as questionable DOPs or inconsistent data sheets, which should immediately raise red flags. Many Chinese birch plywood products cite Latvia as the origin of birchwood, which in my view is often unbelievable and highly questionable for a number of key reasons, and I'll run through those now for you. Number one, the faces are often of too high a quality. They're offered as an A and a B face peeled from a Latvian log, when in reality these high quality faces have certainly not been available from this Baltic region for decades, so why now? History tells you that the quality of birch veneer, the high quality material certainly is exclusively from the northern Russian regions. Number two, the timing of this Chinese birch material volume hitting UK and EU markets has all happened effectively post Russia's invasion of the Ukraine back in 2022. So timing is obvious. This hasn't occurred by chance, and there's been a growing trade pattern ever since, what with China's open trade agreement and the proximity to Russia. Number three, statistics. They illustrate the significant growth in Russian log and veneers supplied to China since 2022. And finally, and I think most crucially, identification, isotopic testing now via organisations like World Forest ID, has rejected the proposed Latvian origin of several identified products in the UK and even in the EU, and this is being actively pursued by the authorities. So yeah, in summary, suspicious birch, when we talk about it, is material that has been deliberately repackaged, reprocessed or misdeclared in order to obscure its true origin and bypass sanctions, regulations or ethical sourcing requirements. Moving on is just, I guess, to focus people's attention on what to look for. There's a few key areas we believe people in the supply chain should pay special attention to. So, physical signs. Products may look at first glance ordinary and in line with standard EU birch plywood, but there are often clear red flags in the material itself. Things like the extremely thin but very high quality clean face veneers, sometimes only 0.2 or 0.3 mil thick. Flaky edges, weak or non-phenolic bonding between layers, or mixed and inconsistent cores. These characteristics would also present limitations in how the birch plywood could be machined, processed and face finished. Secondly, documentation issue. This is one of the most common giveaways. You might see vague or generic origin labels on materials such as Baltic birch without any credible chain of custody behind it. Documentation may be missing signatures, stamps or proper dates, dubious declarations of performance or data sheets that aren't complete or don't look official should immediately raise concerns and questions. Certification checks. I think it's important to look out for mismatched or expired, missing FSC and PSC chain of custody information. In some cases, certificates provided simply aren't valid and you can use tools like FSC and PFC zone certificate search to validate them. If the certification doesn't match the supplier, the product or the region of origin, that's a clear warning sign. Fourthly, the price. If the price is significantly below, EU market rates, it's worth asking why. Suspicious birch is often sold cheaply because it's not going through legitimate channels, and a low price is often the first hook. Okay, welcome back everyone. I think we got to the end of the previous slide. I think now we just want to run on to what to do if you suspect material is of illegitimate origin or you have concerns. I think there's some clear and important steps to follow. So anyone in the supply chain, I would suggest if you suspect, then you pause all use or distribution. So if there's any suspicion that the birch may be of undisclosed or even suspecting it's Russian origin, then stop it immediately. Keeping it moving through your supply chain only increases your risk and the downward risk. Recording evidence, take pictures of everything, the product itself, the face material, the edges, the packaging, labels, batch numbers, and any other associated paperwork. It's often the small details that can help identify where the issue lies. So gather as much as you can while that's still available and in your possession. Report your concerns. Raise it with the relevant bodies such as OPSS, TDUK or DBT. These organisations can investigate further and help ensure that the information gets to the right place and in a confidential way. Raise the issue more widely. This isn't something that should be kept quiet. Speak to your local MPs, authorities, and of course people in the trade, DHH and others. The more visibility and noise there is around suspicious product, the harder it becomes for it to be moved unnoticed through the market. And finally, just encourage others to act. Fair trade depends on enforcement and collective responsibility. When more people in the industry take these concerns seriously and follow the right steps, it becomes much harder for suspicious birch to enter our supply chains. Ultimately, taking action protects not only your business, but the wider industry as well. In terms of stopping this together as a collective, it isn't something that one company or organisation can do alone. It has to be an industry-wide effort. I am aware that OPSS and OTC are reviewing some plywood cases that have recently been passed to them with a view to exposing illegal birch plywood trading in the UK. This is a really significant step, but continual whistleblowing and subsequent enforcement is vital. Penalties for non-compliance with UK timber regulations are strict. They come with significant fines, seizure of goods, and even imprisonment for serious offences and violations of the sanctions. The TDUK are increasingly active and have been prioritising illegal birch trade as a key agenda item when lobbying UK government trade officials. I think everyone in the supply chain has a role to play, from importers to merchants, manufacturers and end users. Every decision we make either strengthens or weakens the system. At DHH Panel Products, we're committed to leading by example. We're continuing to strengthen our own due diligence and verification process, working closely with regulators and trade bodies. And together we can make suspicious origin birch too visible to ignore. When we raise awareness, tighten standards and challenge questionable material, we close the gaps that allow it to slip through. Collective action is what will protect the market, support responsible suppliers and ensure we've got a level playing field for everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Sorry about the IT sound hiccup, but that brings this very brief webinar to a close. I think we're happy to take some questions from the floor, if anyone has any. I don't know if there's any other questions coming out, but our intention is to try and run perhaps monthly update sessions on information that we're seeing from the UK in terms of enforcement, information that's relevant, and just exposure really about sourcing legitimately and responsibly. But thanks everyone for tuning in today. If you need us, our details are are on the invitation from the webinar. So yeah, thanks again. See you again soon.
Thank you.